Hi, everybody. I'm going to wait for a few people to get into our. Oh, my hair is a mess. I just had to run in from outside. um, I'm going to wait for a few more people to get into the X space, and we'll get started. Um, I was kind of torn between continuing on with the book because we're almost done. I think one more session besides today, and we will be done. So I'm going to go ahead and do the book, but we're going to have, let me, hey guys, I'm going to bring Bridget over. And SR71, I see him. So let's get those guys in as co-hosts, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So y'all can obviously see from my post today, I fell into another hole. And I'm just amazed at, again, how many of these holes intersect each other. Because what I haven't published yet is going to blow your mind. Anyway, I have two more posts already prepared, but I use a post formulator, and it won't let me do too many in close proximity to each other. It locks it up. So I have to pace how often I can release them. But the next two will come out over the rest of today, even if I have to manually do them, which I have had to do occasionally. So, and I'm talking, if you guys have not seen it, I'm continuing. I've got two threads going actually at the same time, but I'm continuing today on the Maurice Templesman. And I'm going to tell you guys something that I now have a different hypothesis. I'm actually thinking, and you'll understand why as this gets fleshed out. I'm almost convinced myself now that Jackie Kennedy was JFK's handler. And people would be, appalled at me saying that. But I think it becomes very clear with who she married, Onassis, obviously, and then spent the rest of her life with this Templesman guy. Once you find out how buried into the syndicate this guy is, it makes perfect sense. And I mean around the world, not just, in the United States. It stretches to Canada, it stretches to the UK, the Middle East. He was very good friends with Aiden Khashoggi. So it's quite mind boggling, actually. Yeah, the famous arms dealer. So anyway. Uh, and then, of course, the strange connection between his family, Dodi, and Princess Di. It just, the connections just keep going over and over, and they're intimately linked to the Bushes. It's crazy. So I will continue that. Like I said, the next couple of long threads will go out today. But we're going to finish this book. I have 2 days worth of material left. So between this session and next, we will be done with this book. So, and I've got a couple lined up. I'm still deciding on which one I want to do. Excuse me. Because they're so good. Oh, and let me also remind you, because my daughter is going to kill me if I don't say this, because I forgot like the last 5 times. She's like, Mom, we did get, and if for those of you who are on Rumble, I will, if SR71 I know is over there, please remind me at the end of the show to show it again so people can log on. This, I'm showing the cup that will be on the web. It's on the website right now, called Operation Gladio. On both sides. So doesn't matter if you're left or right-handed. So I was just out working in the garden. There's so much oak pollen in the air here. It's not even funny. It's like everybody has, and I don't ever have allergies, and it's been the worst ever for me. Okay, so section 13. It's labeled Consolidation and the Deep Politics of the Deep Private, meaning private military, private intelligence organizations. In the US, home of the greatest military and intelligence capability anywhere, things were beginning to change. As recently as 2007, an estimated 70% of the nation's intelligence budget was no longer done as part of the government. It was all outsourced. And that's huge. In the earlier years, the outsourcing bonanza, numerous corporations, large and small, competed for dollars. However, just like with the rest of the defense industry, consolidations began to occur. And by 2016, 5 companies controlled 80% of the private sector employees contracted to the US intelligence community. That's crazy. Those 5 firms are Booz Allen, Hamilton, CACI International, CSRA, SAIC, and Leidos, which SAIC and Leidos are the same company, remember, originally. The outsourcing in and of itself is nothing new, but the non-competitive nature of it now is very big. During the Cold War, private enterprises was typically only sought for technical work like developing satellites or sensors or computers. The covert operations in which plausible deniability was sought was another area where they would contract out, to their gladio cells like the Cuban exiles. What has changed dramatically since the 90s is how the garden variety intelligence analysis has been outsourced. In other words, the US intelligence community is no longer relying on intelligence firms for specialized or highly secretive work, but its common, normal functions of gathering intel. And of course, that's problematic because people are going to gather the intelligence they want you to act on, whether it's true or not. The degree of outsourcing in the Pentagon is not necessarily as extreme because, of course, it has DIA and NSA, but it is still being done. While serving as Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld placed a greater emphasis on the use of special operations to carry out normal military objectives. While Rumsfeld has been long gone from the DoD, the reliance on special operations has gotten it's increased even more. So the the special operation forces have been heavily recruited into the private military companies to do work for them. And as we have seen, they've also been recruited into the CIA, into the FBI, and into Congress. Unsurprisingly, the process of consolidation is also unfolding among contractors who deal with these elite soldiers. During the onset of the Iraq War, the big 3 for these types of private military companies were Blackwater, DynCorp, and Triple Canopy. Blackwater, now known as Academy, ACADEMI, because they got themselves in trouble, so they had to change their name. They're a name changer too. And Triple Canopy are presently owned by the same holding company, Constellis, Constellis Group. So in other words, there's only 2. Because when you're owned by the same company, you are no longer actually separate companies. They basically do that as a dodge. So Triple Canopy and the former Blackwater belong to one company and DynCorp to another. The current CEO of Constellis is a former CIA guy by the name of Tim Reardon. So, in other words, I'm describing to you the enterprise that started during the outsourcing that happened after Carter basically got rid of the covert function of the CIA. So, you just can't make this stuff up. So, the CIA is running Constellus, who now owns Blackwater and Triple Canopy, just so you can keep up. And you'll never guess where Tim Reardon was before he came to Constellus. He was the president of Leidos, the company that sprung out of SAIC. Yeah, same one. So, the CIA is basically running this whole thing. So, other interesting links to Constellus were Bush Jr.'s Attorney General John Ashcroft, who obviously played a key role in creating the surveillance state. After leaving government in 2006, Ashcroft founded a consulting firm that catered to clients who produced technology to aid the government in surveillance and counterterrorism investigations. And it just so happens that Ashcroft also sat on the board at Constellus. So, Constellus is ran by the CIA, and the former Bush Jr.'s Attorney General sits on its board. Nothing to see here. Oh, and he was the Attorney General when 9/11 happened. This is so freaking crazy. Okay. Even more curious are two names listed at the International Advisory Board. So this is something else that I've noticed more recently is it seems like every one of these organizations that is transnational not only has a board of directors that you and I would look at and think that was all there was, but they also have hidden on not very obvious websites in some cases that I've dug into, an international advisory board where they hide the international syndicate members. And this is the third company in like 3 days that this has been the case of in research that I've been doing. So the two names, one of which is Jason DeYonker, DeYonker. He is the founder and manager of a private equity firm known as Forte, Forte Capital Advisors. Now we all know what goes on at private equity. Lots of money laundering. Okay. This was the firm that initially bought out Eric Prince out of Blackwater. Oh my God. All right. So let's back up because we got to keep these straight. Constellus is ran by the CIA. Constellus International Advisory Board has Jason DeYonkers, who is a private equity firm, which is a known place where they park laundered money at. And he's the guy that coughs up the money to buy Eric Prince out in 2010 when Blackwater ran into trouble. Okay. DeYonkers and Prince had been friends for years, with DeYonkers having managed Prince's personal financial portfolio for several years. It's entirely possible that he still has ties to him. Though no doubt great efforts have been made to cover the trial. And then there is Jose Rodriguez, the second guy. And who's he? Oh, yeah, he's the CIA guy too, who just so happened to run the entire national clandestine service for the CIA, meaning Operation Gladio. That's what he did in his last job there. So, in the immediate aftermath of 2016's presidential election, Rodriguez's name was even floated as a potential CIA director from the deep state. That's when Mike Pompeo was selected. Then Pompeo moves over to Secretary of State, and Rodriguez's chief of staff during his time, while he was the clandestine director, do you know who his deputy or his chief of staff was? Gina Haspel. And she gets the job. Both Rodriguez.
Wow. I was just going to say, wow.
Both Rodriguez and Haspel has been extensively linked to the Bush era black covert, the interrogation sites and the torture program, all of that stuff. So just so you guys can understand how crazy this network is. The incestuous nature of the private security racket rises on the specter of many of the world's elite spies and soldiers under the control of a handful of private corporations. Erik Prince's ties to the Trump administration are well known. Beyond the fact that his sister, Betsy DeVos, served as Secretary of Education, Prince provided support to Trump during the 2016 election that went well beyond his $250,000 campaign donation. Throughout the campaign, Prince frequently contributed to Breitbart's website. And Erik Prince is a friend of Steve Bannon's. We all know that. Who became Trump's campaign manager and chief strategist in the White House. Prince made several appearances on different Breitbart broadcasts where he accused Hillary Clinton of being involved with the uranium to the Russians and also linked the Clintons to Jeffrey Epstein and Anthony Weiner. His charges were widely championed by people that were Trump supporters, obviously. In the aftermath of the 2016 election, Prince became a popular target for others during the Russian collusion conspiracy theories. Prince also had been accused of establishing a back channel between Trump and Putin. The disturbing aspect of Prince's link to Trump, according to the author, is his relentless lobbying to effectively privatize the U.S. war in Afghanistan. Prince's plan called for the withdrawal of all U.S. troops, aside from a few thousand special operators, and would work closely with 6,000 contractors to finally stabilize the nation that had been war-torn for decades. Prince's plan was going to cost a cool $3.5 billion. And obviously was opposed by everybody in the national security apparatus. Prince went on to suggest doing the exact same thing in Syria. While certainly the most public, Prince is hardly the only individual that's interested in privatizing the security industry. He goes on and talks about Jared Kushner and his role at Apollo Global Management, being another private equity firm, one of the largest actually, and how it interfaced with the Kushner. Um, uh, so apparently, Apollo lent the Kushner company almost $200 million as in loans to do some investments. And then there's also Trump's dealings with Leon Black, who was the owner of Apollo. I mean, he's the one that created it. It's quite possible the relationship between Mr. Black and Mr. Trump goes back even further. Prior to the founding of Apollo in 1990, Black has spent decades working for the infamous Drexel Burnham Lambert Investment Bank, which collapsed shortly before Black founded Apollo. Drexel is principally remembered now for the stomping grounds of Michael Milken and his junk bonds. Black was Milken's right-hand man. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about all of the other connections, but I want people to understand it is my belief that all of these people being in close proximity to Trump is how Trump ended up with the inside knowledge of how to undo all of it. And I'm not going to speculate on who the good guys and bad guys are in that orbit, because some will be bad and some will be good. But just like with Operation Greylord, you and I are never going to know until it's all revealed who's who. You can speculate all you want. You can dig into their connections, and I encourage everybody to do that. That's what I'm doing. But other than putting the facts out and coming up with some patterns, it's almost impossible for you and I to figure out who good guys and bad guys are, because there will be good guys playing bad guys and bad guys pretending to be good guys. Trump also had dealings with Drexel, Burnham, Lambert, and Milken throughout the 1980s, especially as it related to his casino ventures. And remember that Trump bought Resorts International. That was the mafia casinos down in the Caribbean. Drexel's Daniel Lee, who happened to be the casino expert, had information and informally advised Trump on the industry ever since he got into the industry, which would include the purchase of Resorts International. Let's see. Milken and Drexel were also largely responsible for creating Steve Wynn's gaming empire in Atlantic City and Las Vegas. They were apparently they were trying to do exactly the same thing with Trump that they did with Steve Wynn. But Trump kind of ventured out on his own in the golf course resort area as opposed to casinos. And that probably was on purpose to separate himself from what he saw on the inside while they were trying to recruit him, but decided to go a different way. So Apollo is also owned by the Constellus Group. So let's go back. Constellus is owned by the CIA. Ran, not owned, sorry. Constellus CEO was Tim Reardon during this period of time. He there's no such thing as a former CIA, ran the Constellus Group, of which Apollo was part of. Now, go back and look at what I just said. Apollo was loaning Jared Kushner money and also was founded by Leon Black. That's crazy. That's like totally crazy. Okay. So I've got one more though. The holding company that controls Triple Canopy, the private military corporation formerly known as Blackwater. Oh, sorry. Triple Canopy and the company that was formerly known as Blackwater, which is Academy, was acquired by Constellus in 2016. So, and then Apollo acquired. Hold on, I'm getting confused. I had to draw a chart because this is so confusing. All right, so Apollo owns the Constellus Group. The Constellus Group is owned by or ran by a CIA agent. It is the holding group for Triple Canopy and Academy, which was Blackwater. And then Apollo turns around and buys Constellus. So that happened just before Trump became president in 2016, where Apollo bought Constellus. So Apollo, Leon Black's former company, owns a company ran by the CIA agent and two of the three major private intelligence corporations that provide intelligence to the U.S. government. So they said originally that they were just going to turn the company over, take like some pieces out of it, and then basically flip it. But they didn't do that. So Leon Black has been tied to Russiagate allegations in trying to undermine Trump. In 2011, Black had been on the board of directors of a company called Russia Direct Investment, which was an investment fund considered a sovereign wealth fund controlled by the Russian government. During his 2017 trip to the UAE, when Eric Prince allegedly was attempting to establish a back channel to the Russian government, the Russian he was working with was Kirill Dmitriev, K-I-R-I-L-L, and the last name is D-M-I-T-R-I-E-V. Dmitriev just happens to be the CEO of the Russian Direct Investment Fund that was working with Leon Black. Apollo was not acquired. Apollo did not buy Constellus until 2016, but most of the Black involvement with that investment fund happened around 2014. So there is a little bit of a gap. Probably need some additional research on that one. So, but don't forget that Constellus has Jason DeYonkers in it, which is Eric Prince's very, very close friend and former financial advisor. So there still could be a link there. All right. Another interesting connection is DynCorp, which we know was involved. It's considered a private military company. It was involved in drug and human trafficking. The human trafficking and drug connections have been established in court. And like Constellus, DynCorp is also owned by another private equity firm. That firm is called Cerberus, Cerberus Capital Management. The founder and CEO of Cerberus is Stephen, spelt with a PH, Stephen Feinberg, who has known Trump for a long time, and he sat on Trump's Economic Advisory Council prior to the November 2016 elections and contributed $1.5 million to a PAC. Feinberg, like Apollo's Leon Black, cut his teeth during the 80s working at the same company, Drexel Burnham Lambert. In the early 2017, Feinberg was poised to be tapped for a crucial role in the intelligence community. Many people thought that he was going to be the DNI or the chief of the National Clandestine Service, something like that. Which, of course, the National Clandestine Service is where we were just talking about it. It basically runs the Operation Gladio type activity. So Feinberg did not end up with any of those jobs. And a lot of people felt that was kind of a very interesting switch, because I think a lot of people thought that he's like a guy that was being thrown at Trump, who would have been a backstabber as well. But later in 2017, White House Chief Strategist Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner propositioned Feinberg, along with Eric Prince, for proposals to replace American troops in Afghanistan with contractors. Feinberg had had dealings with Prince previously, having taken firearms training at Blackwater's North Carolina compound in 2005. They held talks about investing in various private military companies. On occasion in 2010, Feinberg had ultimately, Feinberg would buy the chief competitor to Blackwater, DynCorp, under Cerberus. So DynCorp becomes a subsidiary of Feinberg's. So wait a minute. Feinberg buys DynCorp, who's already been guilty of drug trafficking and human trafficking. I'm just trying to keep up. So Feinberg, who worked at Drexel Burnham Lambert with Leon Black, owns Blackwater via Constellus, and his former Drexel buddy owns DynCorp, which is supposedly a competitor, but they're very good friends. So after a year of speculation of what role Feinberg would have in the first Trump administration, he was appointed chairman of the Presidential's Intelligence Advisory Board, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the role that Devin Nunes just took. Okay, so that's very interesting, because that board is supposed to be like an independent view of what the CIA and the NSA and DIA all tell the president as far as intelligence goes. So I'm not sure how independent the guy who stands to make billions of dollars off of covert operations how independent will that guy be? I think that's odd. All right. So in the 1970s, the Presidential Intelligence Advisory Board had played a big role. And by 1976, 6 of the 16 members then involved in that board were members of the Committee on Present Danger, which I haven't talked a lot about this, but I talked about it a while back when we were doing the World Anti-Communist League. they are basically in bed with the likes at the time in the 70s with the World Anti-Communist League, all into gladio operations and everything else. So they also created a thing called a Team B. They wanted an independent, a quote unquote independent review of everything that had to do with any CIA intelligence assessment that came to the president, which was very controversial at the time. Let's see. There's another company that said that had close ties to the presidential intelligence advisory board by the name of Netscape Communications, that was founded by James Barksdale, Admiral David Jeremiah, and Joan Dempsey. Dempsey was a CIA veteran who became vice president of Booz Allen Hamilton. Feinberg was in position to conduct a review of the U.S. intelligence community, one that will likely suggest even greater privatization, which of course plays into his role because he's the private organization that would pick up the work, which is why you can't be doing that shit. So he goes on to make the point that while he's saying all this stuff about Trump, it really didn't matter that it was Trump, because Clinton and all the Democrats did all exactly the same thing. Clinton was one of the big privatization outsourcers in the 1990s. It was crazy because I watched that stuff happen. Privatized base housing, privatized our medical care. It was crazy. And another that he points out, one of Clinton's big initiatives was privatizing the Pentagon supply line and all the logistics behind it, which of course benefited Kellogg, Brown, and Root, which is a subsidiary of Halliburton, which of course the Bush and Cheney and all of those guys are connected to that. Between 1992 and 2000, Kellogg, Brown, and Root contractors was dispatched to Bosnia, Kosovo, Macedonia, Albania, Hungary, Croatia, Greece, Italy, Somalia, Zaire, Haiti, a large swath of Southwest Asia, all to support U.S. Army operations. The Balkans, on the whole, was a major boon for contractors during Clinton administration because of the Bosnia air war. And the infamous Carlyle Group provided most of the interpreters used by the U.S. Army. And another defense contractor by the name of BDM, Bravo Delta Michael, which was a major defense contractor and intelligence contractor that was 100% owned by the Carlyle Group. They did more elite kind of stuff, not the basic logistic stuff like interpreters and stuff. But thanks to their entry into Bosnia, they began to branch out and eventually ends up working with the maintenance to ground vehicles used by the Army via a subsidiary by the name of United Defense Industries. In Croatia, the private military corporations, Military Professional Resources, Inc., was contracted to train the nation's army. It later did the same for Bosnia. Elsewhere, DynCorp assisted the U.S. Army in Bosnia with its supply lines and the International Police Force, which is how we get to the Phoenix program. These guys training the Army and the National Police is exactly what happened in all of Latin America, all of Southwest Asia, and it's how they embed their own operatives for long-term exploitation of those entities to destabilize the country even further is by the quote unquote training of their military and their national police. Just as a reminder. The private intelligence companies also benefited from Clinton's reign with over $18 billion in contracts just in 1995. 4 years later, they would rise on an annual basis to $22 billion, largely because of the conflicts that Clinton and the CIA themselves started. So you can see it's a self-licking ice cream cone. We're going to have Operation Gladio because it makes the syndicate money. All right. And then he goes into the Obama administration with Robert Gates, James Clapper, John Brennan. Gates was a member of the SAIC board of directors in the 90s. And then after he had been the CIA director, he went to SAIC's board. Clapper was the director of GOI, a satellite vendor that basically contracted to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. And it also says that he had served as the president of a national security affairs support group that was eventually renamed Intelligence and National Security Alliance. So again, he's just making the case that there's no difference between administrations. One after another is feeding into this international syndicate, and they're everywhere. But here's the part I wanted to get to. There are indications that Clapper and Brennan were willing to go even further than criticizing Trump in order to remove him from the White House. Much of the Trump-Russia collusion narrative derives from a highly dubious piece of work called the Steele dossier. The dossier, in turn, was compiled by a research and strategic intelligence firm known as Fusion GPS. Fusion had hired the law firm Perkins Coie, which had been retained by the DNC and Hillary Clinton to dig up dirt on Trump. Curiously, at the same time Fusion GPS was working on behalf of the Democrats to dig up Russia collusion dirt on Trump, it was also working for a Russian firm, Prevezon, Prevezon, in an effort to get sanctions lifted off of Russia. As to the latter, Fusion GPS had been employed by a Russian attorney, Natalia Veselnitskaya, who is the one that they tried to implicate General Flynn with, via a law firm by the name of Baker Hostetler. For their efforts on behalf of Prevezon, who, again, was basically Fusion GPS is at pivotal in, they had to have a reason to be dealing with Russia, because they're going to say that the information that they got for the Steele dossier came as a result of this relationship with Russia in the hiring of them to try to get sanctions removed, right? That's how the Natalia Veselnitskaya ends up in this whole conversation. So that's their quote unquote legitimate reason for being in touch with Russia. So then when they turn around and say they have Russian contacts that has given them and verified the information in the Steele dossier, it makes it seem more credible. So, and of course, Veselnitskaya is the woman that set up the meeting with Don Jr. that was supposedly meant to cast dispersions on Don Jr. and their ability to navigate this complex scenario, and was part of the whole ruse in order to get Trump. Veselnitskaya had met with Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson on the morning prior to the Trump meeting. This occurred just as Simpson was beginning to put together the Steele dossier. Though both Simpson and Veselnitskaya had insisted the earlier meeting had absolutely nothing to do with Fusion GPS and Trump's overthrow. Which, it's that swampland thing in Florida. If you believe that, I've got land to sell you. As to the dossier, throughout the fall of 2016, it was shopped around to 9 different news agencies, and no one believed it. There was good reason for this, because the claims that Steele made as a MI6 officer were all unverified. Steele later revealed that one of his sources for the 2009 article on CNN, which was compiled by quote unquote citizen journalists posting on a website, the people making these claims, in other words, had no affiliation with CNN at all, but he said they did. Nonetheless, the claims made by Steele began to be picked up by the press in September of 2016 without mentioning the source or any of the specifics. It was not until January 2017 that things got really crazy. First, outgoing director, National Intelligence James Clapper instructed FBI James Comey to brief Trump on the dossier. At the briefing, Comey informed Trump that the media already had the dossier and was looking for a hook to talk about it, which, of course, Comey's meeting did exactly that. Several days later, CNN ran the story using Comey's briefing as the hook. Clapper later acknowledged discussing the Steele dossier with CNN as early as January 2017, leading to the speculation that it was all orchestrated. Brennan had not been as closely linked to the Steele debacle, but he, along with Clapper, was at the forefront of launching the initial investigation into Russian collusion during Obama's administration. Rand Paul even went so far as to accuse Brennan of being the key figure behind all of it. It's not like the CIA does that kind of shit, like overthrow governments or anything. In August 2016, Brennan approached Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid and briefed him on his concerns over Russians' interference in the election, which was going to be used as a pretense later on. 2 days after that meeting, Reid wrote a letter to James Comey warning Comey of just such that. Among the allegations made by Reid were taken from the Steele dossier concerning Trump's aide, Carter Page. While it was unknown if Brennan was Reid's source, it is highly likely that he was. So, just to recap, the basis for Russiagate is all highly speculative. The report was used as the impetus to basically destabilize and overthrow Trump once he got into office. And of course, they were hoping, because it went on throughout the summer of 2016, that it would keep him from getting elected. And it almost has a mirror image, if you go back and look at what they did to Allende, to what was done in Chile. The whole destabilization, the accusations, and the manipulation of the media in order to get them to report exactly what you want, the discrediting of the candidate. Then once that didn't work, then they move into the next phase, which, of course, was the 4 soft coups during the administration. And God knows how many attempted assassination, which we're likely to never know, because, of course, that's what they do. So that's where we're going to end today. Like I said, we will be done. 14 will be our last section. And the next one will be the conclusion of that book. And I will announce what our next book is going to be at that point. And I probably will spend some time going over this thread that I'm doing right now, because it really does a good job of linking all of these pieces that we picked up over the last couple of years together in a mind-blowing way. So I'll probably spend a show or two just going through the connections in there as well. So,
that's just crazy stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring I think SR-71 fell out.
I think you're right.
I took him off and bringing him back.
Stella. Stella in the house.
Hi. Oh my gosh, I've missed you guys. I was in for the beginning part and I got a phone call and had to pop out, but everything that you guys have been talking about, saw some reruns of old shows that you had, and holy cow, you got just, and everything that's coming out right now, and I mean, whew, okay, that's it. Sorry.
SR-71.
Thank you, Colonel, and thank everybody for attending today. I mean, today, every time I turn around, you keep outdoing yourself, Colonel. But what I'm really getting at here, listening to all of this that transpired, none of this stuff came out about Trump during his impeachments and everything else. What's really got me puzzled up to this point, and I can understand why, but what's really got me puzzled up to this point is in 2016, when they started pushing real hard to get rid of him during his candidacy, how did they know he was going to do this?
What do you mean? How did he know he was going to do what?
How did they know Trump was going to be this bad for them?
Well, because they had ran so many operations at him and they never could corrupt him. So they ran the Resorts International trying to what's the word? Embed him in the mafia casino racket, and they couldn't get any dirt on him there. They ran the mafia at him in New York City, and they couldn't get him dirty there. They ran Hollywood at him. They gave him a TV show, and they couldn't get him dirty there. So when he announced that he was running for president, he would be the only president ever to get in the position to not have dirt on. If you don't have dirt on him, you can't control him. That had to petrify them.
Exactly, and what's worse is he knew it all.
Because they had ran all these ops on him.
And don't forget the real estate market and the banking collapse and all that other stuff too, because he was a part of that as well.
I
You have to
know.
understand all the different bureaucracy within the penny stocks and all that, the shenanigans that were played back then. No matter what they threw at him, they could not corrupt him. Even like in the little circles that he was around, I mean, they threw, I'm sure, you know, because he was in the same circles as Epstein, but then he turned Epstein in for trying to go after one of someone else, one of his friends' daughters and stuff like that. So whatever they throw at him, they cannot get him. And with him understanding all this other stuff and all the different mechanisms or gears that are involved with this, it's just, I mean, I'm blown away by all the stuff that you've shown, because I had no idea how deep it really went. I mean, I actually, you know, thought that, you know, that the government things were for the people, but you know, I was stupid.
Back in our naive days.
My brother's waking up. My brother is waking up and he listens to your recordings, Colonel Towner. And my brother was a skinhead, punk rocker, Bernie Sanders, rah, and he has completely changed even to the sounds of Russia now. Thank you so very much. You guys, I got goosebumps just saying thank you, Colonel Towner.
You are welcome, Stellar. That's the whole reason I'm doing what I'm doing. Illini, go ahead.
Hey, Colonel. Interesting presentation here. You basically hit on a whole lot of, you know, some of the big names from finance between Drexel, Burnham, Lambert.
Yes.
Which probably kind of like, it wasn't quite the Goldman Sachs of the 1980s, but it had to have been like the Morgan Stanley or, you know, the Merrill Lynch or Lazard,
yes,
specifically in junk bonds, with Michael Milken.
Yes.
They were involved in just about every single junk bond deal out there. And then, of course, you know, you've got Cerberus Capital Management, you've got Apollo, you hit on the Carlyle Group. Like, these are all firms that if you were, a kid at like Wharton or something like that, you would want to go there and basically land there as your first job and work there for 3 or 4 years, and then go do something else. These were the jobs that like all the kids in finance wanted to get, and it's disturbing to see that sometimes some of this stuff is going on behind the scenes. Maybe the rank and file employees didn't necessarily know what was going on, but it's disturbing that these companies are influencing some of our best and brightest out there.
So,
of course.
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
I get the distinct impression that the whole scam of junk bonds has something similar at the end of the day. And I'm not saying a mirror image. I'm saying something similar to the savings and loans debacle.
It was ultimately about the credit crisis that basically did everybody in. The savings and loan debacle, though, started with I think it was Penn Square Bank in Texas, and the oil bust.
But do you know how they did that? If you go back and you look at how they did it, and I'm just going to make up A, B, and
basically laundering FDIC insured funds. Was basically they were laundering risk. Was kind of the way of thinking about it during the deregulation, during the first Reagan deregulation.
Well, let me share with you as it relates to Operation Gladio. You will find, and I'm just going to use generic, not name names, because I'd have to go back and look them all up. But if you took like a bank in Dallas, a savings and loan, a bank in Houston, and a bank in San Antonio, and this was like a real thing. I just don't remember all the different names of the banks and the people. And let's say each bank had 5 directors on it. Those directors all are affiliated with Operation Gladio. And they were the bath guy in Houston that was selling all of the aircraft to the Saudi Arabians for the Bush, and then using that money to fund covert operations. That type of a relationship. So Bath would be like the chair director at the Houston bank. Then there would be 5 different people at the San Antonio bank and 5 different at the Dallas bank. Then they would start loaning each other uncollateralized loans. And I mean in the millions of dollars. And so out of the Houston loan directors that were on the banks in San Antonio and Dallas. And then the San Antonio one would loan money to the Dallas directors. They were loaning money to each other. And this is exactly what happened in Castle Bank and BCCI and Nugent Hand. And when you, then it broadened into Arkansas and several other markets where all of these people that they wanted to bring into this network and dirty them up, if you will, they were loaning them uncollateralized loans so that when eventually the savings and loan would collapse because none of it was collateralized, and they overextended themselves. And once they did that, they would take like seed money out of the bank just before they announced that the bank was going to collapse. And so none of the directors had to pay any of that money back because it was all uncollateralized. They all just walked away from it all with hundreds of millions of dollars.
That makes a lot of sense. What you're saying here, I mean, people went to jail for the S&L crisis, and part of it was self-dealing on lending.
But not the directors.
The bankers would lend themselves, the banks owned money in some cases, and that was what they really got nailed for. But there was also all of this, there were probably a large number of people who never got caught.
Yes.
And there were all these other schemes, and the people who didn't get caught, well, they're off, probably causing other issues.
They're off to the next scam. And that's why I don't know enough about, I have a master's degree in business, but not the finance side, more the economic side. So the more I read about the junk bond and Enron and all of that, the more I get the same feeling where the same people who grew up in the same networks were involved in all of this. And to me, it was like the next scam to steal all of our money. And there's been a scam after a scam after a scam. AIG, same thing. They just seem to keep creating these scams that leave us holding the bag while they're walking away with hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Solyndra, the Solyndra stuff, that whatever it was, the solar stuff that was going on during Obama.
But that's different. That's different. Well, I'm just saying it's different.
Well, Acorn Financial, that was, they were funding people to even open for buy houses to use for sex trafficking. I mean, go into that. So that was the fall of the banking stuff. It was insane.
Yeah, I'm talking about just like major national financial catastrophes, and it's not unlike what they were doing prior to World War II with the ebbs and flows of the market. And you go back and you start looking at those things and you find out there's some really interesting transactions that kind of started the Depression. And then there's some other really interesting transactions that, you know what I mean? And so you wonder if they were manipulating the markets back then after supposedly they created the Fed, which didn't allow that kind of ebb and flow to happen. How many others have they done since then? And the more I dig into the banking aspect of Operation Gladio with the Nugent Hand and the BCCI and the timing of all of that, it's just very interesting to me. Under the auspices, our thesis is this is all about stealing our wealth and stealing our resources. And they will use whatever mechanism they can in order to do that.
Colonel, don't forget Joe Kennedy. And, obviously he was a bootlegger with, connections.
Yes.
You're familiar with that. But
Yep.
He also ran a number of bear raids and market manipulations in the 1920s. Allegedly, the story is that he reformed himself and he became the head of the SEC. And the Securities and Exchange Acts, those were good, relatively simple bills. And Glass-Steagall was a really good bill. We had good regulations that were simple and effective that got passed in the 1930s that basically kept the system relatively objective, and people could, watch everybody and see if the rules were being followed or if they were being disobeyed, especially at banks. We started to do away with some of that in the 1980s, and certainly by the time we repealed, Glass-Steagall in 1999. It goes with the whole social cycle here, but I do think that there's something.
That's the 30s and the 20s as well. And the Great Depression was set up. It was like Colonel Towner said, and what you guys are saying, it was always about taking the wealth away from and assets away from the people. So no, it has always been the plan. They always have things planned way in advance, and you can see how they've done it. The banks, the stock markets, they've all been manipulated. They couldn't manipulate the black stock market out of Oklahoma City, so what did they do? They burned it down. So
Okay. Hold on just a second, Stellar. Let him finish his thought. Hold on just 1 second. Go ahead, Illini.
So I have a feeling that if you look at things, you can probably find some mob figures who were involved in, various bear raids and, manipulations and pumps and dumps of the 1920s and 30s. It wouldn't be a shock to see something like that reforming itself again. It wouldn't be a shock to see regulatory collusion going on. There's certainly insider trading that happens in the markets. There's a number of white papers that kind of demonstrated if you know where to or there's white papers that kind of theorize that's going on based on a market action, before and after certain events. So I'm sure that there's issues going on in the market out there. And yeah, it's interesting that you've uncovered this. At some point, I want to sort of raise I don't know if you want to deal with it now or we can save it for later. I did want to ask you some questions about the whole Canada situation, Operation Gladio, because it does seem like there's a lot of political corruption going on out there right now, that kind of intersects with the fentanyl issues and the tariff stuff going on too.
That's actually a very good point. And you know what, Illini, because this thread that I'm doing includes so much of Canada, I think that's going to be the perfect place to do that. So I think we'll hold off on that aspect of it, but I would love to have you part of that. And I want to do that probably Monday. We'll finish this book. So probably during the Tuesday session, I really do want to cover that because you're right. Canada has functioned in many ways as the UK's child to our north, and the incestuous nature of the syndicate in America, the syndicate in Canada, and the syndicate in the UK in this, especially the two I haven't got to yet, is going to be laid bare. The mining interest, the alcohol interest, everything. It's a very close-knit circle.
Thanks.
Sure. And I'd love to have you part of that because it is about the money. Stellar, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the same thing that I think everything has been manipulated. Because if you pull up like the graphs from the stock market crash from the Great Depression, and you pull it up, you guys mentioned, I think you guys mentioned the 1980s stuff that was going on, and you pull up the graphs from the 80s when there was another one, and then you pull up the 2008, 7, 8, whatever stock market crash. They literally all have the same pattern, and like from the 80s and the 2006, 7, 8 one, and what happened and what's been going on with the stock market here now currently, and like 2 years and 3 years ago. For me, it was watching new homes and stuff like that. But you can see that they literally all follow the same pattern. You can lay them on top of each other, and they're almost identical. It's just, more expensive now.
Yeah. Andy, our resident Canadian, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Colonel. Yeah, I won't, steal the show here in terms of bringing up Canada, but I'll just share one thing, and just being a bit apologetic for stuff, like Canadians booing at sports and stuff like that. It's obviously a disgrace, but if you've seen, I don't know if you heard on Fox, but our premier who just threw a snap election in the middle of winter at the shortest period of time, like 30 days for an election is really supposed to be reserved for a regular scheduled election, but he put it down as the shortest period possible. I don't know if it was against the rules, but he did it, and basically threw everyone for a loop to try and participate in this election. And I also, I'm not sure if there were some funny stuff happening, because my results were I ran against Ford, and my results were a lot lower than they were the other year. So I'm just looking at some things. I'm trying to get to the bottom of that. But the one thing I want to say is, the majority of Canadians, or a lot of them, are psyoped. I mean, I was at Costco just, buying a couple things, and I'm reading the ingredients of, I try to avoid palm seed oil and seed oils in general. And then one guy came to me, I'm reading too, but it's my stuff I want to buy was made in U.S., so I didn't pick it up. And I told him, no, that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for seed oils, but people are messed up that way, and they all feel they have to pitch in and suffer because the counter tariffs are just going to hurt us. So, I mean, I'm doing the best I can, especially on Twitter. I don't have that many followers, but I'm pushing back on a lot of this, and I don't know what has to be done, because the media and the politicians are in sync. If you heard the media scrum of Doug Ford, they were just like singing along with him. And if you saw the coverage of the election with the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, Rosemary Barton or whatever, she's always critical of conservatism, and she was painting Ford as being the greatest premier in the history, because he won 3 straight majorities. It's just pathetic how they're all in cohorts, and I can't see anything other than Gladio there. So one way or another, whoever's controlling the Conservative Party in Ontario, it is really, really messed up. And people here are not yet awake enough to realize that they're being manipulated by the media. So I'll just leave it there. And no, thanks for letting me put in my 2 cents.
Sure. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the media and politicians work for the same entity. So they're on board a lot with each other. Yeah. Go ahead, SR71.
Thank you, Colonel. Just a heads up, we lost Bridget as a co-host.
Yeah, I just put her back up there.
Okay, and the other thing, there's a question out on Rumble from Gail. She wants to know your assessment of Trump and the hostages and Hamas. And she feels he's being pulled by this whole thing every time he turns around. So maybe you got some insight on that.
I'm not sure that he's been fooled. I think at this point that's probably not possible. There's a much bigger deal going on with the Israel-Hamas situation than most people are aware of. This is a matter of revealing an element of Operation Gladio in a way that is palatable to normal people. We know, because of research, that Hamas was set up and funded by NATO and NATO-aligned countries like Israel. Hamas' original mission was to terrorize the PLO, intimidate them to not fight back on behalf of the Palestinians. And they have, like other Gladio cells, continued, like the Taliban, not the Taliban, sorry, Al-Qaeda, the Mujahideen, ISIS. They have been, once you create a terror group, you find multiple uses for them. Hamas provides a good use for Israel in that anytime they want to pick up or attack a neighbor, they just have Hamas attack Israel. And instead of immediately attacking Hamas, Israel goes out and attacks others because that's really the purpose of it. And that is not unlike the situation between Turkey and the Kurds, that every time the Turkish Gladio cells wanted to pass something, well, the people in charge in Turkey wanted to create some national police force or some unpopular initiative, they would just go down, dress up like Kurds, attack their own citizens, and blame it on the Kurds. And then they would say, see, we have to do this because we're under attack. This is a ploy that has been used all over the world. Well, how do you expose that? I think what we're watching is the exposure piece of that. Not all of the pieces is going to make sense to everybody because we don't know what all of the intricate details are of these operations from the inside. I've been looking at these things from a very like 40,000 foot ish because they're all classified. We don't know a lot of the stuff until it becomes declassified, and you can kind of after the fact put pieces together. So based on what we do know, that's what my assessment is of what's going on over there right now. And because of the brainwashing that has occurred via the Zionist movement of associating Zionist with the Israelites of the Bible, it is going to take some very complicated and longer untangling of that knowledge, because it has been at least 100 years in the making. So we're doing the best we can here, but that's my assessment of it. Southern, go ahead.
Explaining with the casinos, finally, I figured out how Trump managed to build in the 70s and 80s, because you had the Gambino family and the other mafia family. They were called the Concrete Cartel.
Yeah.
They did 80% of the business there. So you had to work with the mob, the mafia. And it just made sense. And I did some digging on Grok, and it came up, and it said, Trump said, yeah, I overpaid by, say, $1 million. They thought they had me, but my buildings got up faster. I won, but I did not play with them.
Yeah.
He did the same thing with the casinos. He used them.
Yes.
He paid more for stuff, but he had a better benefit for the future.
So I'm not going to
play with snakes.
But I'm not going to say he used them. In the building thing, I'm not going to say, I don't think it's fair to say.
Maybe I'm using the wrong word.
Yeah.
He doesn't play in the dirty side, is what I'm thinking.
Yes. So if you're going to be in construction, you have to have construction workers, you have to have unions, you have to have all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And every piece of that business is controlled by mafia elements in New York City. Trump worked within their network and never allowed them to dirty him up. So that's not really using them. That is operating within their ball game without them ever being able to dirty him up. And that's what they do best. So it's not enough that you come in to a market and they have to have dirt on you, because that's where they get their control. So for him to not only have worked in their market and thrived, became a billionaire inside of their controlled environment with no dirt on him, that is next to miraculous. And he didn't do it in one industry. He didn't do it just in construction. He did it in the casinos. He did it in Hollywood. He did it in so many industries, sitting side by side, the dirtiest people in the industry, and never got dirt on him. And like I said, as soon as he announced he was going to run for president, that had to make every single one of them's head blow up.
Oh my God, because there was, I remember watching Handy one night, and there's this ex-mob guy, I don't guess you're ever an ex. He said, yeah, tried to dirty him up. They can never dirty him up.
Yep.
He was very clear about where he played, and he overpaid, but he got the concrete faster because you have to have it. And he was able to get his buildings up faster than his competition because there was a high growth then. So you were competing for the resources. Like you said, the unions and everything for the resources.
Yep.
So he overpaid, and they said, oh, we got it. Well, no. You just got paid more, but he benefited more. And he didn't go into the gray zone.
Yep.
That is miraculous.
Yes, it is.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And that is what made them panic when he announced he was going to be president, or that he was running for presidency, because if he won, they wouldn't be able to control him. And they got dirt on everybody. Carrie, go ahead.
Banks got bailed out. We got sold out. That was our chant at Occupy Wall Street. I just wanted to remind people that there wasn't always a 401k. And I consider that a scam, a really big scam. And the stock market is also, I mean, I could go into details about it, but it's not real, kind of. And the other thing I wanted to say was back to Trump. I lived in Istanbul, and there was a Trump Tower. And I lived in New York City, and there was a Trump Tower, several actually, Trump, buildings. And he also has a building in Russia, I think. And I just think his mindset, I think it goes deeper than, this interplay between the crazies. I think he sees himself as part of life and part of the build, and not like over it and separated from it. And I see that through his interactions globally. So I just wanted to point that out, that mindset is precludes all the rest.
Okay, thanks. Stellar, go ahead.
Well, when you guys are talking of, okay, so Trump could never get a gaming license in Nevada. Never, even to this day, up until when he tried last, okay? Where his Trump Tower that, you guys are talking about is in front of what used to be Howard Hughes's Summa Corporation, and like the headquarters, or like the warehouse and headquarters and stuff like that for his hotels, but it was right behind that. He's right in front of it. So I just thought that was interesting too.
Wait a minute. Trump Tower is in front of Howard Hughes's old building?
Well, yeah, because that's where the Summa Corporation, that was that whole big area there behind there. Yeah, so that was all Howard Hughes, and that's where, where the employment center and all that stuff was over there. And then in front of it is where Trump Tower is now. It was next to where the Fashion Show Mall is, but just a little west.
Did you read all that stuff I just did about Howard Hughes?
I was in the space with you.
Is that crazy?
Yes, I did go through it. Yeah, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to bring that up too. And also, like, Howard Hughes had the gaming license, but Trump could never get one. Steve Wynn kept blocking it.
That's very interesting.
And Steve Wynn, he's half Italian, half Irish, and his funding was always what we always thought was through, the mob. And the Stardust, that's where that Rosenthal guy, he had a sports book at the Sahara. I mean, this whole town was ran by mobs. My ex-husband was from Shaker Heights, and he's Jewish. And his father came over from Russia, supposedly in the early 1900s. And his father ended up dying, so he was brought up in an orphanage. He left when he was 16 years old, but like during Prohibition and all that other stuff, he opened up a photography thing, and the mob, as well as the commissioner from the police department in Cleveland and all of them, I mean, they all showed up at my ex-husband's birthday parties.
Cool.
No, but they're all intertwined together. And, the Jewish mob, the Italian mob, it was here. I mean, I used to go to mob weddings when I was in high school. It was a very different time back then. That's how old I am.
Definitely a different time, that's for sure.
Well, that's why, like, there's Nevada's so corrupt, but I found that to be very interesting with your thread. And then you had that, you had the space with talking about Howard Hughes and all these different ties.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I wanted to tell you and stuff like that. With I forgot to say that one day, but it just came to me when you guys were talking today. But Trump always has. There's always meaning behind everything that he does and everything that he builds on and where he builds. So, they all tie together.
We're definitely finding that out, aren't we? Yeah, that's interesting. SR71, go ahead.
Thank you, Colonel. Stellar, you say that it just struck me. I believe it's Drexel Durham. Trump could never get into the NFL. He couldn't purchase an NFL team. Well, Red McCombs owned the Minnesota Vikings, but he was also part of Drexel Durham. So I can imagine how that conversation there went down.
Well, that's interesting. Southern, go ahead.
I wanted to go back and make sure I heard something correctly. You were talking about there's other things going on between Israel, Gaza area, and Hamas. Hamas, when they attacked Israel, were they paid to do that from Israel?
So I wouldn't use the word paid to do that. What I would tell you is Hamas is like every other terrorist organization set up by central intelligence agencies to perform upon demand.
Yep.
And they have done so repeatedly in the past.
Yeah, I knew that Iran uses them like a proxy military. The Houthis.
No. Hold on. No. So leave Iran out. Hamas has operated as an entity to perform terrorist events on demand. Not unlike ISIS, not unlike Gladio cells, not unlike anything that we talk about. They are just like that. They perform terrorism on demand. So it has nothing to do with Iran. Just like the whole Houthi thing, that whole thing is, in my opinion, based on my research, bullshit. We talked ad nauseum about what happened in Yemen back over 100 years ago when the UK needed Aden as a port. They had coal, and so they basically invaded Yemen and took over Aden. They basically run much of what goes on in Saudi Arabia because of oil concessions along with the US. So anytime they wanted to destabilize Yemen, they did so from the south where Aden is. And they used Saudi to push down from the north because Yemen is just south of Saudi Arabia. And they would squeeze the Yemeni nationalist to shut up and not thwart their efforts to use Yemen in whatever way they wanted to. And over time, the nationalists in Yemen kept getting more and more pissed. The only people, once they destabilized and overthrew Nasser in Egypt and basically took over Egypt as well, because it was Nasser that fell out of favor by coming to help the Yemenis thwart off the UK as they had done out of the Suez and fight back Saudi Arabia. So if you recall, in the 7-Day War in 1967, Nasser had deployed 75,000 troops into Yemen to help them get the UK under control and get Saudi Arabia out of their northern sector. And it was during that time that Israel attacked Egypt to try to overthrow Nasser. So over time, the only country that would help the Yemenis interior was Iran. There are other Soviet style weapons over time that appeared there. I have not found any direct relationship between the Soviet Union. I mean, it could be out there. I just haven't found it. Supplying weapons like they did to Lumumba and several other places like that. But what we have to keep reminding ourselves is everything that comes out of the government, as far as intelligence. I just spent the better part of the last half of this book explaining to you that the people that we have outsourced intelligence capability to has in their own vested interest, because they own not only the intelligence privatization, they also own the military privatization. They have it in their own best interest to lie when it comes to intelligence. So if you want the conflict in Yemen to continue, you are going to mislabel everybody, and you're going to tell me that the good guys are the bad guys and the bad guys are the good guys, because that's what they do in every single conflict. And that way, we make sure that we destabilize the country, which is exactly what we're doing in Yemen. And the whole announcement of the classification of them being a terrorist, all that does is give the CIA the permission, and the military for that matter, to go in and assassinate them all. And it's bullshit. They are nationalists that want their fucking country back. They have been robbed. They have been bombed into the Stone Age. And all they want is their country back.
Wow. We are just, I knew, the CIA I knew was so pervasive, but this is insane.
But when you realize that we've outsourced all of this shit, and the same people that own the intelligence piece also own a piece of the professional military piece, and then those bastards go into the White House and say, yeah, we think you should privatize the entire Afghanistan thing or the whole Syria thing, so we can just get richer. And oh, by the way, we're the ones that gave you the intel to tell you who the good guys and the bad guys were. Who the fuck doesn't see that as a problem?
So how do we change it?
I think Trump is changing it, but I think it has to be shown to people how effed up it is before we're going to en masse get behind the changes that are necessary to change it. That's my hope anyway. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, Colonel, thanks. Always awesome, listening. And my mom loves your space. She always loves listening in because you're a wealth of knowledge. So some of these, this is my problem, is some of these, personalities, big personalities on X are they're like, oh, like I had to confront somebody. I'm like, are you saying you're pro-Hamas? Like, are you serious? Like, I can't believe that you're saying that. Like, are you for the people of Gaza or against them? Because, these people, Hamas, they hold these people captive, the people of Gaza, essentially. So, and they are the reason for Israel to go in and bomb them, right? So, with their attacks. So it doesn't serve the people of Gaza to support Hamas. And I'm like, you're a complete idiot. I'm sorry, but that's the truth of the matter, is because they work against the best interests of the people of Gaza. Like, if you really cared about the people of Gaza, you wouldn't support Hamas. You condemn them. And I personally believe, like, throughout history, there's conquerors and conquered, and Israel was set up, and that's it. Let's and I do believe, I understand the historical context of previous to that, it was British Mandate Palestine, which was essentially, my grandmother was born in Latakia, Syria. Her family roots from there to Lebanon to British Mandate Palestine, essentially, and that's like the quarter Arab in my family. And that was my grandma. The rest of us are Slavic, but she roots there, and then I look further back, and she roots to Kurdish, essentially, like the last name. The gentleman that I could check, he originally was a Kurdish person. So, like, this idea, I know Judea was there before, so I'll just look at it historically. But the way I look at it nowadays is, the conquerors and conquered, and unfortunately, that's what happened. So now we have Israel there, and I do believe that people have the right to defend themselves, of course, but not, with these Operation Gladio type things going on. I go further, we were training.
But Adam, hold on a second.
Sorry.
If you're saying people have a right to defend themselves, if it is Israel that is, or the West in general, NATO aligned countries that are behind the training and equipping of Hamas, and they are a terrorist organization that is used on demand in order to attack whoever they want attacked, in order to give that person an excuse to either
attack back. Yes.
No, hold on. They're using it as an excuse to expand the territory. It is not just an excuse to attack back. Every single thing they do, there is a motivating factor as to why it's being done. Gladio doesn't just happen for violence. Gladio happens in order to secure resources.
It's for that canal that they've been wanting for a long time, right?
Potentially.
You create that.
Yeah, that is potentially a motivating factor. And so, but you're falling into, in my opinion, one of the kind of sketchy areas. Just because I call out the fact that Israel is using a terrorist organization to attack itself in order to give itself legitimacy to go steal other resources from other countries, doesn't mean I'm pro-Hamas. It means that all of that is wrong. And if you go back to
yes, I wasn't insinuating that in any way.
But if you go back to the whole premise of Operation Gladio being an element of the concept called strategy of tension, it is very important to understand that Israel was created in the aftermath of World War I under the auspices of that British mandate. And
right.
It became a country, a state, after World War II. So all of that was devised by the exact same people that set up the strategy of tension. It is the same people that set up Pakistan by stealing property from Afghanistan and India. It's the same people that created East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh. It's the same people that took the entire Kurdish country of Kurdistan away and divided those people up into 4 countries that they newly created that hate them. So if their idea was to go around, have an entire world war, to set up a bunch of fake countries in order to destabilize those areas so that they forever could control them resource-wise, then the pretense of why Israel was set up is bullshit to begin with. Because it was set up as a mechanism for them to be able to call on demand anytime they want, and then brainwash everybody into affiliating the name of Israel with the Israelites of the Bible in order to allow the Zionist movement to control the entire world. And that's bullshit. And I don't have a problem calling out that as bullshit, because it is.
I don't disagree with any of what you said. One thing, with the Arab Spring, right, Operation Gladio, right, with what they did in Syria and the Free Syrian Army, one of the things that I knew of, or had an idea of, is when we claimed to be training Free Syrian Army in Jordan. when it was actually IS, which became ISIS, right?
Correct.
To go,
We were
and they went
creating
in
terrorists.
undermined.
We were
Yeah.
creating terrorists.
Yeah, essentially, we were training terrorists to go into Syria and
Yes.
destabilize it. Part
Yes.
of that, whatever 7 countries that what's his name, General Wesley Clark spoke about.
Yes.
Like 10 days after 9/11.
Correct.
And that guy was a Democrat, you know.
Correct.
Much respect to him though for blowing the whistle on that.
Well, but he's also the guy that was in charge of the splitting up of Yugoslavia. He was in charge of that entire war. He knows
Yeah.
firsthand exactly what.
That's right.
Yes, he was the NATO commander. Hello. He was running the
you're
Gladio
right.
operation.
I totally forgot that he was.
Oh yeah,
related
I'll
to
never
that.
forget it.
And that's where the rest of my family. I come from a messed up areas in the world.
Yeah.
You know, my other 3/4 is Yugoslavian, like
Yeah.
Bosnian, right?
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
like I was born in Syria, moved here at the age of 4, and that's my background is like some really messed up areas.
Yeah, that bastard ran the entire war to destroy Yugoslavia under an Operation Gladio auspices because they actually imported Muslims that they had trained during the conflict with the Mujahideen and Russia. They actually imported them into Yugoslavia and pretended that like they were native.
That's the thing. With Ali Izetbegovic, who was the leader of the Bosnian people at the time, when the Muslim Brotherhood came to offer support, he turned them down. He said, "Get the heck out of here."
Yeah, because they were terrorists.
Like Egypt did with
yeah,
their election.
Because they were
the
CIA
Bosnians
trained
don't want
terrorists.
anything to do with that Muslim Brotherhood crap, you know.
Yeah, they
That
were.
was Obama pushing, you know.
There were CIA trained terrorists, is what they were.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Coyote, go ahead. Sure.
Hey, Colonel, appreciate you having me. And yeah, Adam, I kind of share your frustration like a little bit on it. Like, you know, and I heard what the Colonel said because, you know, diving into some of these things, Colonel, you tend to, like they have like you're either going to be a pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian. You know, it's like, no, like I want to be up the middle, going to address the real issues that are going on. And it's where I don't want to be I want to be a pro-American.
That's all I am. Pro-American, and I know my history.
Exactly, and that's the thing about it. But you know, you go to it, and it's designed like that. And I want
Yes.
to say something because I know you caught it, Colonel. And I've dove off into this. And Adam, I'll try to send you the stuff to it. But you know that the Colonel caught it right there. The right to defend itself. And remember, people, I'm not pro-Palestinian. I'm pro-America. I just want this shit to stop. And I know the foreign influences infiltrating our government to an all-time high. But it goes back to the 2009 the Israel Project. I believe it was Frank Lultz, if I'm not mistaken, on my history, Colonel. But they had written that as far as this, like, I guess Hasbro type propaganda for us to hear. And if you hear us Americans, we steadily repeat right to defend itself or whatnot, even if it's infiltrating another country and actually, you know, taking over land or whatnot, because that is part of the design of this. It's the Israel Project 2009 Global Language Dictionary, which was an American went over and even dove off into the narrative set that we received through the media and whatnot. And it's very, 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 especially here on Spaces, man, important to know this because there are operatives and people at the gym, whatever you want to say, that come into this strictly to push these type narratives and talk about that defense strategy and whatnot, even though it's not, you know, like what's actually like happening per se. And I'm just very interested in the conversation. And I appreciate you for having me, man. But yeah, not pro-Palestinian people, not pro-Israel. Let's go America. America only at this point. Shit.
I'm with you, Coyote. Yeah, it's crazy. Cousin Ed, I saw your hand up. Did you still want to say something?
I was trying to go shoot squirrels.
Okay, well, you can't do both at the same time, so.
I know, that's why I put my hand up.
Okay.
Somebody had mentioned something about the canal for Gaza. I want to remind everybody, that's like peanuts, that canal. the Gaza marine gas fields are worth trillions of dollars. They are sitting on trillions of dollars. And if you look at some of the proposed projects that I hate to say Trump is putting forward, but it happens to have a Marine One port. Interesting. And that's the Marine One Gaza gas fields. So if you think that they're fighting because they don't get along, it's the same Gladio move. They want the gas fields. Those gas fields, by the way, are why Hamas was installed to begin with, because Arafat wanted to nationalize those gas fields. There was actually a contract with British Gas that Tony Blair decided to put his 2 cents in and cancel the contracts, even though he had no authority to do so. The contracts were canceled with Palestine. Palestine wanted to nationalize the gas fields. Now, where have we heard that before? Right? Where Iran, Venezuela, Libya. Libya is a big example of that. They had free everything in Libya because they shared all of the resources. And
they wanted to break off from the IMF and do a gold standard as well.
That's right. And, not for nothing, you cannot overlook the fact how much Palestine is actually worth. And I find it very interesting that Egypt and all the other Arab states came in with a proposal for $52 billion to rebuild Gaza. And it says no. That would be the United States and Israel. Well, why? If we're so concerned that they're living in such destruction in Gaza, right, in a shithole, which it is, right, using our bombs, why would we care that it's Egypt and the Arab states that go in? Because of the gas.
Well, let's see how that plays out, because there's a lot of people that believe that Trump said that, which prompted the Arabs to make that counter proposal, because that's what he wanted to have happen anyway. So let's see how it plays out.
No. I totally get it. However, he also went back today and said, oh, no, we don't like that idea.
Yeah.
That was on today's news from the Times of Israel, right? Not that they're not a propaganda outlet, but, America doesn't approve of what Egypt is wanting to do.
I don't.
I
have a problem with with that particular media. There's some actual media in Israel, I'm surprised, that are legitimate, good sources. But again, we'll see how it plays out.
Right.
Do you see that though? Y'all see that though? Like every time we get information from over there, it's this whole like Israel says it. Like we go off of the like we have no media that will cover that. And I looked off in the history of that. It's like hell, they tried in the early '80s, but they started sniffing out, I guess, what was going on. And once they did, they got labeled anti-Semite and fired from their little news outlet. It's crazy.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Which is why Cousin It does a lot of research using Yandex and reading other countries like Russia's news, because that's the way they don't have that problem over there. So you get more legitimate news. Unfortunately, you're not going to find that in the West because they're all crafting the news. It's not actual news. Southern, go ahead. Southern? Hello?
Actually glitched out.
Maybe. Bridget, can you take her down and bring her back up?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to let her go, and then I've got to run. We have friends in from Michigan for the Strawberry Festival, and we're going to go to dinner with them. And again, I apologize to all of you guys. I know a lot of people have been sending me DMs and stuff like that, but I'm pretty much just the few things that I've been able to publish during this time. For the 10 days that the Strawberry Festival goes on, I'm like incommunicado normally. just because that is such a big deal. We have people from all over the country that comes in, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Detroit, and it's the only time I get to see them. So just be aware.
Texas?
Huh?
Is that in Texas?
No, that's in Florida.
Yeah, we got one in Texas. I didn't know. I was like, no shit. I know.
No, let me tell you something, Coyote. Now that you brought that up, I grew up going to the Strawberry Festival here in Central Florida. Right, it's the winter berry capital of the U.S. So, and San Antonio, which I arrived in, when was that? 2003. I saw in the local paper that they had a strawberry festival that was like 30 minutes from San Antonio. And I'm like, oh my gosh, a strawberry festival in Texas. I love Texas. So I'm like, I'm going to the strawberry festival. Let me tell you something. That was the biggest piece of bullshit I have ever seen in my life. They had, so evidently like 3 or 4 years before that, during the festival, they had none of their strawberries were ready during the strawberry festival. So they had imported strawberries from California. And people got pissed off because they didn't tell anybody that they were not Texas strawberries. And somehow it leaked out that they weren't. They got sued for false advertisement. And so do you know the year that I went, that same thing happened? They had a late harvest and they had no strawberries. I was at the strawberry festival in Texas and there wasn't a fucking strawberry in the entire festival. There were people outside at the gate selling flats of strawberries outside that were not Texas strawberries, by the way. And so I had my 2 daughters with me and we're walking around. I'm like looking everywhere and I'm like, where the hell's the strawberries? There's strawberry material, there's strawberry clothes, there's strawberry everything. There's no strawberries. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I went up to one of the information booths and I talked to the lady and I'm like, look, I'm a strawberry fanatic. My entire house is done in strawberries. Where's your strawberries? And she told me that story and I'm like, I am at a strawberry festival in Texas and there's not a single strawberry anywhere in the festival. So don't give me that bullshit about Texas has one.
It's weak. It's all about money too. Like I know what you're talking about because it's like, oh, what's this shit? It's not very strawberry-ish.
Yeah. So I will tell you that our strawberry festival here has never, in the 40 some years I've been going, ever not had strawberries. Just saying. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah, I used to go strawberry picking as a kid. I had a farm like right across the street from where I lived in Deerfield Beach or Coconut Creek. It was essentially, but it was border along Boca Raton. But I am in Central Florida, so like this is the first I'm hearing of this Florida Strawberry Festival. I looked up the website. Seems pretty cool. Like about an hour and a half away from me.
Adam, where do you live under a rock?
Yeah, I've never heard of Strawberry Festival in Florida.
Oh my God. If you drive down Interstate 4 and you look over to the left, to the south side, there's a big water tank in Plant City it's a strawberry water tank.
Oh, that's what that is? That's headed over from like Central to Tampa?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I don't know how you missed the Strawberry Festival, Adam. I'm really actually disappointed in you.
I'm sorry, but listen, so it's till March 9th, and like, what is their music? I see that there's like carousels and different things like
there's
that.
a whole midway, there's a kid zone, they have headline entertainment. Like I just saw Reba last Friday. I saw Leonard Skinner last night. Gonna see John Party tomorrow. Sawyer Brown is on Saturday and Dan Fogarty is on Sunday. Yeah, they have somebody crazy. They have 2 concerts a day, a 3:30 and a 7:30. So
nice. I'll tell my brother and his fiance if they want to go out there for this weekend.
It is like the coolest. It's the old-fashioned county fair. They have like the roasted corn on the cob. They have like every fried everything you could ever think of. And they have some new thing it's not new. It's probably the last 4 or 5 years. That is some kind of a buttermilk pancake wrapped around a hot dog. It's like a Coney Island thing. But my husband's convinced that there's crack cocaine in them because the line to get one is like a mile long. It's the longest line of any food thing there, and there's probably 150 food vendors there. So we're convinced that they're actually selling crack cocaine out of the
She said crack cocaine.
I'm telling you, I've never seen anything like it. But anyway, yes, you'll love it. You'll absolutely love it. There's vendors of every kind that you can imagine. And a lot of the hometown kind of stuff, like Watkins Organic Vanilla has a booth there. And they have all kinds of organic spices and stuff like that. Like this Friday, my nieces and nephews, well, my great nieces and nephews will be showing their pigs, their cows, and their chickens. So it is, no kidding, a real county fair.
I don't know if I'll end up going out there because I have my space on Saturdays, which is like kind of a hang up. But if I do end up going, I'll give you a call on X.
Okay.
And then we'll say hello.
Yeah, it's totally awesome.
But yeah, I'll definitely tell my brother about it and tell him to go check it out because that sounds like a lot of fun.
It is so much fun. All right, guys, I'm going to run. Thank you all for being here. Let's see, tomorrow, I will not do a show, but I will definitely be back on Monday. Because again, we are going to the Strawberry Festival tomorrow. So, and we will finish the book on Monday. And then on Tuesday, we're going to go over this thread that I've been doing. And then we'll dive into a new book, and I will announce that new book on Monday.
I want to tell you, Colonel, I appreciate what you're doing. I think that you're kind of a good, I guess you say buffer. I don't know if that's the right word, but kind of looking into some of this stuff that a lot of us are opening our eyes to or whatnot. This is a good place to go find it without having to be labeled some kind of crazy propaganda word or whatever. So I do appreciate what you're doing. I know it's tough, and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Coyote. My biggest frustration with this is that the co-opting of it, where people have talked all around the edges of it. And one of two things is true, and I don't know any of them to be able to assess which is actually true. They either offer you a little bit of it and then basically say that's all there is, or they talk about parts of it and they either have not realized what it actually is, which I find that almost to be impossible, since the majority of the people that do that talk around the edge of it, are actually make a living at investigative research or journalism. And so it has really been perplexing to me. And obviously the most obvious one is Whitney Webb, who I have all the admiration for in the world as far as her research skills goes. The same way that I'm fascinated with Doug Valentine in his research of the CIA and Operation Phoenix and everything to do with the stuff that he writes about, but he is absolutely blindfolded when it comes to Trump. And he's pretty much a very neoliberal kind of a guy. And so you just have to kind of factor that into the research that you do, that you rely on him for. But a Whitney Webb who has no ability to kind of span out to the 30,000 foot look and think that there may be other things going on, that everything isn't as it seems, like psychological operations. She'll write about them, but she doesn't realize they can actually be good and bad kind of thing, which is very puzzling to me. And her book, which I did a review on my Rumble channel, of One Nation Under Blackmail, the entire first volume of her book is about Operation Gladio, and she never came across Operation Gladio, the actual term. She uses the word condor once, which she describes all of Operation Condor, not all of it, but pieces of it in South America, and actually goes to the point of saying, yeah, it has the same name, but it's not Operation Condor. What the fuck? Yes, it was. So that, again, it's just puzzling to me that they put information out, but they don't want you to have the names of any of the information so you can do your own research. And the one thing that I have found most fascinating about all of you is as soon as we began talking about it, y'all began doing your own research. And half of the stuff that I now have and know came from y'all. It came from stuff that you guys experienced, places you live, places that you've traveled to overseas. And you're like, hey, did you know this? Or hey, did you watch this YouTube thing? Or hey, whatever. That at least half of what we come up with came from you guys, because you're literally the smartest audience out there as far as I'm concerned. And by not telling people the names of things, you hamper or gatekeep the information that the people listening to you are able to have. And the last thing I want anybody to rely on me for is all of that information. I want people to have that information, because then y'all are, 30 some other thousand people out there all gathering information that makes all of us collectively smarter. So that's kind of my thought process behind all of this. And you're right, it is not an easy thing to do. Some days is way more frustrating than others. And to which I'm going to say this, and then I got to go. Y'all know that the dumbass Sarah, whatever her name was, blocked me. And I just realized that I had forgot to put that picture of her. One of you guys sent, excuse me, one of you guys sent me, and I'm going to give her credit here. So hold on just a second. So sent me a DM that said, let's see. Oh, here it is. Betsy Tanner sent me a DM saying, hey, did you see this? It's Sarah Adams saying, so Doge is reportedly closing the building I'm working in. Well, I'm sorry, Sarah. I thought you were not CIA. So she announces that they're closing the building that she works in on the day that John Ratcliffe said that he called everybody out of the main building and to another building and gave them pink slips and told them to leave. So what did I miss? Is she just...
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah. Is she telling us that she's the CIA, like I said from the beginning? But I would have not seen that, because she blocked me. Because as soon as I called her bullshit for going on that Sean Ryan show and lying to everybody, she immediately blocked me, because I had dates and I had data that she could not refute. So she immediately blocks me, and then basically just outed herself. So anyway, I do have good days. That was one of my good moments. And then I have frustrating moments where you get people like, Mike Benz and Ian Carroll on the Joe Rogan show and talk all around this thing and never actually call it what it is. So you guys, their whole audience could be part of the solution in finding out about all of this stuff. So I take the good with the bad and roll with the punches. That part I'm very good at. That's been the motto of my entire life. It's called persistence. And that's my middle name. So anyway, y'all have a nice... I'm sorry?
No, I was going to ask on that because I watched that Ian Carroll thing. Do you think that, like, Joe Rogan and them kind of set some guidelines to that, though? Because I know he'll dive into it. Well, I think that I don't know shit anymore, Colonel. But
I don't think Ian Carroll actually knows the name of it, even though I have said it repeatedly to him on X. I don't know that he has ever read one of my posts. So I don't know if he knows it. I don't know if he's just not saying it. And honestly... If you go on someone's show that sets fences for you, you're a gatekeeper. You should 100% refuse to go on anybody's show that sets fences for you. You are not about free speech if you go on someone's show that tells you, here's what you can talk about and here's what you can't. My response to that was, fuck you. I'm not going on your show, and I'm going to go tell everybody you just tried to gatekeep me. That's what everybody should do. I don't understand why people don't do that. So I'm going with the fact that no, Joe Rogan didn't gatekeep him. He either doesn't know or won't say, and he's the gatekeeper. If someone knows that Joe Rogan is a gatekeeper, then I stand corrected, but I'm not going to assume that he is. He's had some very interesting guests in there. As far as I'm concerned, one on this particular subject that doesn't know half of what I know, but that's me. Okay. So with that, I got to run, guys. I'm already over time. Sorry about that. We will be back on Monday. Take care. Okay, guys, thank you for being here. Good takedown. Yeah, too many cowards. You're absolutely right. Yes, and SR71, thank you for reminding me. Everybody, please do the thumbs up. Follow me on Rumble. It helps us get more views. And if you want a coffee cup, Operation Gladio definitely helps out with the book buying. Take care, everybody.